The rumor. Mira had always been curious about humans. She had seen them from a distance, walking through the massive space station, talking in their deep voices, always moving with purpose. They were strong. They were fast. And they were dangerous. Everyone knew that. But today, she heard something new, something that made her stomach twist. "They eat their own," whispered Zurak, an older alien with gray scales and sharp yellow eyes. He leaned in close, his voice almost a hiss. "When one of them dies, the others, they devour the body." Mira felt her heart pound. That can't be true. Zurak clicked his tongue. "Believe what you want, little one. But I have seen things, strange things. The humans do not leave their dead behind. They take them away. And when they return, the body is gone." Mira shivered. The space station, Aegis 7, was home to many species. Aliens from all over the galaxy lived here, working together, trading, learning. But humans were different. They had arrived only a few decades ago, and in that short time, they had risen to power. They were warriors, explorers, survivors, and now, cannibals. She tried to push the thought away. Humans were intelligent. They built great ships, cured diseases, and fought against the terrible threats in deep space. Why would they do something so barbaric? But Zurak wasn't finished. "They say it is a ritual, a way to keep their dead close, to absorb their strength." His yellow eyes gleamed. "You know what else? If you refuse to take part, you disappear." Mira's breath caught in her throat. "That's a lie." Zurak chuckled. A dry, scratchy sound. "I hope so, little one. I truly do." He patted her shoulder and slithered away, leaving Mira standing in the crowded marketplace, her mind spinning. She watched a group of humans passing by. Their faces were unreadable, their expressions calm. They laughed at a joke she couldn't hear, their teeth flashing white. Did they really eat their own dead? It sounded impossible. It sounded monstrous. And yet, the humans had strange customs. She had seen them fight, seen them bleed, seen them mourn their fallen comrades. But she had never seen a human funeral. Where did their dead go? A cold feeling crawled up Mira's spine. Just then, a shadow fell over her. She turned. Captain Ethan was standing right in front of her. Ethan was a tall human with dark hair and sharp blue eyes. He wore his black military uniform, the insignia of the Terran fleet shining on his chest. She had seen him before. He was a respected leader, known for his bravery in battle. But now, after what Zurak had said, she saw him in a different way. A predator. A hunter. "Mira," he said with a nod. "I need to speak with you." Her throat felt dry. "About what?" Ethan's gaze was steady. "A friend of mine died in battle yesterday. We're holding a farewell ceremony tonight." Mira's heart pounded. A ceremony. She thought about Zurak's words. She thought about the missing bodies. Ethan's voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "I'd like you to attend." Mira felt trapped. If she refused, would she disappear like the others? If she accepted, would she be forced to watch something horrifying? She swallowed hard. "What happens at this ceremony?" Ethan's expression didn't change. He simply smiled and said, "You'll see." The ceremony begins. The corridors of Aegis 7 were quieter at night. The usual hum of traders, mechanics, and diplomats had faded into a distant murmur. Mira walked carefully, her footsteps light against the polished metal floor. Her heart pounded in her chest. She wasn't sure why she had agreed to come. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the way Captain Ethan had looked at her, not as if he were inviting her, but as if he were testing her. The farewell ceremony was taking place in one of the human quarters, a private room hidden behind thick, reinforced doors. The entrance was guarded by 2 soldiers, their faces expressionless as they scanned her with their glowing blue visors. One of them nodded. "You're on the list. Go in." Mira stepped inside. The first thing she noticed was the smell. rich, spiced, almost intoxicating. A long, polished dining table stood in the center of the room. 10 chairs, 9 occupied, all humans. Ethan sat at the head, his piercing blue eyes watching as she entered. The table was already set. Silverware, plates, glasses filled with a dark amber liquid. And in the middle, resting on an ornate metal tray, was a covered dish. Mira's stomach twisted. The room was too warm. The lights were dim, casting strange shadows across the humans' faces. They weren't sad. They weren't mourning. They looked calm, almost eager. Ethan gestured to the empty chair. "Sit." Mira hesitated, then forced herself forward. She slid into the seat, feeling the eyes of the humans around her. "This is a tradition," Ethan said, his voice smooth. "In war, we lose people. When we do, we remember them. We make sure they're never forgotten." Mira swallowed hard. "How?" Ethan's smile was small. "You'll see." A woman at the other end of the table, Lieutenant Ava Monroe, poured the dark liquid into Mira's glass. "To Captain Hayes," she said, lifting her own. The others followed. "To Captain Hayes." Mira hesitated, but she didn't want to stand out. She lifted the glass and took a sip. The liquid burned down her throat, warm and strong. Then Ethan lifted the cover off the dish. Mira's breath caught. A thick, red slab of meat steamed on the tray. The humans watched her closely. Ethan took a knife and slowly cut a slice. The meat was tender, juicy, dripping with its own juices. He placed the piece on his plate. Then he took another and placed it on hers. Mira stared at the meat. The rumors, the missing bodies, the strange customs of humans. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the fork. Ethan raised his piece, his blue eyes locked onto hers. "To our fallen." The others did the same. Mira's pulse pounded in her ears. Was this what she thought it was? Was she really about to eat? The humans ate. Their knives cut smoothly through the flesh. Their forks lifted the meat to their mouths. They chewed slowly, savoring it. Their expressions were almost serene. Mira could feel their eyes on her. They were waiting, expecting. Her fingers clenched the fork. Her stomach churned. If she refused, would they turn on her? Would they decide she wasn't worthy? The metal doors behind her clicked shut. She was locked in. No escape. Ethan tilted his head slightly, still watching her, testing her. Mira closed her eyes. A horrifying sight. The taste was rich, savory, smoky. Juices coated Mira's tongue as she chewed, her mind racing in panic. The meat was tender, almost buttery, but the thought of what it might be made her stomach churn. She wanted to spit it out, but she didn't. She forced herself to swallow. Across the table, the humans watched her. Their faces were calm, unreadable. Their knives scraped gently against their plates. The soft clink of forks and glasses filled the dimly lit room. Mira's heart pounded so hard she thought they might hear it. Ethan smiled. "Good, isn't it?" Mira couldn't answer. She pushed her plate slightly away, her hands resting in her lap. She wanted to wipe her tongue, to rid herself of the terrible thought gnawing at her mind. What if the rumors were true? What if she had just... She couldn't finish the thought. Lieutenant Ava Monroe wiped her mouth with a cloth napkin. "You seem uncomfortable, Mira," she said, tilting her head. Mira straightened. She was being watched, evaluated. She forced her expression into something neutral. "I'm fine." Ethan smirked. "You don't look fine." The other humans chuckled softly, not in a mocking way, but knowing, as if they had seen this reaction before, as if they had expected it. Mira's fingers curled against her lap. She had to be careful. Something wasn't right. Ethan set down his knife. "You know, I've seen this before." The hesitation, the doubt. His blue eyes locked onto hers. "But you don't need to be afraid. This isn't a bad thing." Mira's skin went cold. She had spent her entire life on Aegis 7, surrounded by dozens of different species. She had seen their customs, their rituals. Some were strange. Some were terrifying. But this was something else. She took a slow breath. What kind of meat is this? The room fell silent. The humans exchanged glances, a smirk here, a raised brow there. It was subtle, but Mira caught it. A silent conversation, a private joke. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "It's tradition," he said simply. "That's not what I asked." The air felt heavier now. Ethan studied her, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. Then he gave a small shrug. Meat is meat. Mira's chest tightened. That wasn't an answer. She felt the walls of the room closing in, the dim lights suddenly too dim, the air too thick. She needed to get out. Now, she pushed her chair back slightly. "I think I should go." A deep voice spoke from the other side of the table. "You haven't finished your meal." Mira turned. The man who had spoken was broad-shouldered, his uniform tight across his muscular form. He didn't threaten her, but the weight of his words settled heavy in the air. Mira swallowed. She glanced at the sealed metal doors behind her. No way out. She forced a smile. "I appreciate the invitation, but I don't think I understand this tradition. Maybe it's best if I—" Ethan raised a hand, cutting her off. He sighed, then leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. His smile was gone now, his expression unreadable. "Mira," he said softly, "do you know what makes humans strong?" Mira's breath caught. Ethan tapped his fingers against the table, his voice quiet, measured. "It's not just our weapons, not our ships, not even our numbers." He leaned in slightly. "It's how we remember." Mira's throat tightened. Ethan gestured toward the plate in front of her. "This isn't just food. This is memory." His blue eyes locked onto hers. "This is Captain Hayes." Mira's stomach twisted. She felt lightheaded, her vision narrowing. The edges of the room blurred as her body tensed, every instinct screaming at her to run, to get away. Ethan continued, his voice disturbingly calm. "We don't waste our fallen. We don't leave them behind. We take them with us. We carry them forward." Mira's breath came fast and shallow. She had eaten it. She had eaten part of Captain Hayes. The taste still lingered on her tongue. She felt sick. Ethan sat back, watching her reaction with interest. "You seemed surprised." Mira's mind raced. "What do I say? What do I do? If she panicked, would they see her as an outsider? Would she end up like the others? Swallowed. Erased." The walls of the room felt smaller now. The air too thick. She forced herself to breathe. Ethan tilted his head. "You're wondering if this makes us monsters." Mira didn't answer. He smiled. "But tell me, Mira, what's worse, forgetting those we love, or ensuring they're always a part of us?" The other humans watched her, waiting. Mira's fingers dug into her lap. What was the right answer? She had to choose. A horrifying sight. The taste was rich, savory, smoky. Juices coated Mira's tongue as she chewed, her mind racing in panic. The meat was tender, almost buttery, but the thought of what it might be made her stomach churn. She wanted to spit it out, but she didn't. She forced herself to swallow. Across the table, the humans watched her. Their faces were calm, unreadable. Their knives scraped gently against their plates. The soft clink of forks and glasses filled the dimly lit room. Mira's heart pounded so hard, she thought they might hear it. Ethan smiled. "Good, isn't it?" Mira couldn't answer. She pushed her plate slightly away, her hands resting in her lap. She wanted to wipe her tongue, to rid herself of the terrible thought gnawing at her mind. What if the rumors were true? What if she had just— She couldn't finish the thought. Lieutenant Ava Monroe wiped her mouth with a cloth napkin. "You seem uncomfortable, "Mira," she said, tilting her head. Mira straightened. She was being watched, evaluated. She forced her expression into something neutral. "I'm fine." Ethan smirked. "You don't look fine." The other humans chuckled softly, not in a mocking way, but knowing, as if they had seen this reaction before, as if they had expected it. Mira's fingers curled against her lap. She had to be careful. Something wasn't right. Ethan set down his knife. "You know, I've seen this before." The hesitation, the doubt. His blue eyes locked onto hers. "But you don't need to be afraid. This isn't a bad thing." Mira's skin went cold. She had spent her entire life on Aegis 7, surrounded by dozens of different species. She had seen their customs, their rituals. Some were strange. Some were terrifying. But this was something else. She took a slow breath. "What kind of meat is this?" The room fell silent. The humans exchanged glances. A smirk here, a raised brow there. It was subtle, but Mira caught it. A silent conversation, a private joke. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "It's tradition," he said simply. "That's not what I asked." The air felt heavier now. Ethan studied her, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. Then he gave a small shrug. "Meat is meat." Mira's chest tightened. That wasn't an answer. She felt the walls of the room closing in, the dim lights suddenly too dim, the air too thick. She needed to get out. Now, she pushed her chair back slightly. "I think I should go." A deep voice spoke from the other side of the table. "You haven't finished your meal." Mira turned. The man who had spoken was broad-shouldered, his uniform tight across his muscular form. He didn't threaten her, but the weight of his words settled heavy in the air. Mira swallowed. She glanced at the sealed metal doors behind her. No way out. She forced a smile. "I appreciate the invitation, but I don't think I understand this tradition. Maybe it's best if I—" Ethan raised a hand, cutting her off. He sighed, then leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. His smile was gone now, his expression unreadable. "Mira," he said softly, "do you know what makes humans strong?" Mira's breath caught. Ethan tapped his fingers against the table, his voice quiet, measured. "It's not just our weapons, not our ships, not even our numbers." He leaned in slightly. "It's how we remember." Mira's throat tightened. Ethan gestured toward the plate in front of her. "This isn't just food. This is memory." His blue eyes locked onto hers. "This is Captain Hayes." Mira's stomach twisted. She felt lightheaded, her vision narrowing. The edges of the room blurred as her body tensed, every instinct screaming at her to run, to get away. Ethan continued, his voice disturbingly calm. "We don't waste our fallen. We don't leave them behind. We take them with us. We carry them forward." Mira's breath came fast and shallow. She had eaten it. She had eaten part of Captain Hayes. The taste still lingered on her tongue. She felt sick. Ethan sat back, watching her reaction with interest. "You seem surprised." Mira's mind raced. What do I say? What do I do? If she panicked, would they see her as an outsider? Would she end up like the others? Swallowed. Erased. The walls of the room felt smaller now. The air too thick. She forced herself to breathe. Ethan tilted his head. "You're wondering if this makes us monsters." Mira didn't answer. He smiled. "But tell me, Mira, what's worse? Forgetting those we love, or ensuring they're always a part of us?" The other humans watched her, waiting. Mira's fingers dug into her lap. What was the right answer? She had to choose. The truth behind the flesh. Mira's eyes fluttered as she fought against the shock of what she had just done. The taste of the meat still clung to her tongue, a flavor both rich and unsettling that she could not easily forget. The silence in the dim room was almost deafening as her mind churned with questions and fear. Every muscle in her body screamed to run. Yet she sat frozen, trapped by an invisible force of duty and expectation. Captain Ethan leaned forward once more, his blue eyes intent on her face. "Mira," he said softly, "I know you are troubled by what you have experienced. But you must understand, there is more to this ritual than you know." His tone was calm, yet every word carried an undeniable weight. Mira's hands trembled as she clutched the table's edge. "What is this truly about?" she asked in a quiet voice, barely above a whisper. "Why must we do this act of remembrance?" The room remained still, and for a long moment all she could hear was her own rapid breathing. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "Our traditions are not always easy to grasp, especially when seen from the outside," he explained. "You may think that what you ate was the flesh of Captain Hayes, and that idea fills you with horror. But I promise you, nothing is as it seems." He paused, letting his words sink in. The other humans at the table watched her with expressions that were both sympathetic and expectant. Their eyes, though hard to read, hinted at deep emotions and secrets they had long held dear. Lieutenant Ava Monroe leaned forward, her voice gentle. "We are not monsters, Mira. We do not act out of cruelty. Instead, we carry on the memory of our lost ones through a sacred tradition." Mira's mind raced with 100 questions. "Then what exactly did I taste?" she asked, voice quivering. "How can something so bitter and shocking be a way to honor someone I admired?" Ethan's gaze softened, and he reached out as if to comfort her. "The meat you tasted was grown in a laboratory, a symbolic representation made from the cells of our fallen comrades. It is not true flesh in the sense you imagine, but a carefully prepared substitute, crafted to evoke the memory and spirit of those we have lost." His words, though meant to soothe, only deepened the maze of confusion in her mind. Mira's thoughts were in chaos. She remembered Zurok's warnings, the whispered rumors of cannibalism that had first unsettled her. Now, here was a different truth, one that was complex and wrapped in layers of tradition and emotion. "So you mean to say that it is not real meat?" she asked slowly. "It is something grown, created to remind you of Captain Hayes." "Yes," Ethan replied, his voice steady. "Our scientists have learned to grow tissue that mimics the original, preserving the essence of our loved ones in a way that lets us feel they are still with us. When we partake in this ritual, we are not consuming their body in a literal sense. We are consuming a memory, a part of them that has been transformed into something that can be shared among us." The explanation was difficult to accept at first. Mira closed her eyes, trying to process the surreal idea that loss could be honored by such an unusual means. "It feels so strange," she admitted. "I feel like I betrayed something important. I feel like I did something I can never take back." Ava Monroe's gentle voice cut through the silence. "Sometimes, traditions challenge us to see beyond our instincts. It is a way to bridge the gap between life and death, to ensure that even when someone is gone, they are never truly lost." She paused, her eyes kind and earnest. "We believe that by partaking in this ritual, we allow the memory of our loved ones to live on in our hearts and in our community. It is our way of fighting the oblivion that death can bring." Mira's eyes searched Ethan's, looking for any hint of deception or cruelty. Instead, she found only sincerity and a profound sadness that spoke of endless loss and the desperate need to remember. The room seemed to shrink around her, the air thick with the power of shared grief and the hope of eternal remembrance. The humans around her were not savages, as the old rumors had painted them. They were guardians of a tradition meant to honor the deep bonds of friendship and loyalty. Still, the heaviness of the moment pressed on her. "But what if I refuse to take part in this tradition?" she asked, her voice trembling with the weight of her emotions. "What if I cannot accept this way of remembering?" A chill ran down Ethan's spine, and his gaze turned serious. "Refusal is not taken lightly," he explained quietly. "Our culture is built on trust and the belief that we stand together even in death. To refuse means to risk isolation, to be set apart from those who share our burden of remembrance. It is not a punishment, but it is a choice that changes your path. Mira's heart pounded in her ears as she considered the implications. Here she was, a visitor in a world where tradition meant a literal consumption of memories. The decision before her was more than a simple act. It was a test of her willingness to accept an entire way of life, with all its beauty and its pain. Could she embrace a culture that honored its dead so intimately, or would she always remain an outsider, doomed to watch from afar as others found comfort in a practice she found so alien? Ethan's voice was soft, yet insistent. In our way, to share this meal is to share in the strength and the sorrow of those who are gone. It is to allow their spirit to live on in you, to remind you that love and loyalty are not erased by death. His word hung in the air like a solemn promise, a promise that through this ritual, even the deepest losses could transform into a powerful living memory. Mira's mind reeled with uncertainty. Every instinct in her warned against the strange practice, yet every word from Ethan and Ava urged her to look deeper, to understand that in this human ritual lay an answer to the fear of forgetting. As the voices around her faded into a heavy silence, Mira knew she stood at a crossroads. One path led to isolation and disbelief, the other to a painful but profound connection with those she had lost. In that quiet, fraught moment, Mira made her choice. She would try to understand, to embrace the truth hidden behind the flesh, even if it meant facing her own fear of being consumed by the very memory she sought to honor. And as she lifted her fork for another careful bite, the weight of this decision, the raw sorrow of loss, and the promise of remembrance mingled into one final, resounding truth. In every end, there is a beginning. The shocking revelation. Mira sat still, the weight of the moment pressing against her chest. The taste of the meal still lingered on her tongue, and though her stomach had settled, her mind had not. Had she truly accepted this? The idea of consuming a part of someone, even symbolically, made her feel like she had crossed an invisible line, one she could never return from. The room was still, the heavy presence of the ritual settling over everyone at the table like a thick, unshakable fog. The humans had welcomed her into something sacred. But was it truly an honor, or was it a test she was meant to fail? Ethan leaned forward, his fingers interlocked on the table. His piercing blue eyes studied her carefully, searching for something. Uncertainty, fear, regret. He was measuring her. "You did well, Mira," he said finally. "Few outsiders ever get this far." The words sent a chill through her. Few. She swallowed hard, pushing down the knot in her throat. "How many refuse?" she asked cautiously. Ethan's lips twitched slightly. Not quite a smile, not quite a smirk. "More than you'd think, less than you'd hope." The statement made her blood run cold. What happened to the ones who refused? She wanted to ask, but the words stuck to the roof of her mouth like glue. Instead, she studied the faces around her. The other humans were relaxed now, enjoying their drinks, talking quietly. They had let down their guard. But something was wrong. The moment was too smooth, too perfectly arranged, like a play being performed just for her. Mira clenched her fists beneath the table, struggling to keep her expression neutral. She had been led here, brought into this room, given a plate, watched as she hesitated, as she accepted, as she struggled. It had all been intentional. A test. And that meant they were still watching. She inhaled slowly. "So, if I hadn't eaten it," she asked, forcing her voice to stay level, "what would have happened?" The table went silent. Too silent. The air felt heavy again, the warmth of the room turning oppressive. Ethan studied her for a long moment. Then he reached for his drink, taking a slow sip. "That depends," he said at last. "On what?" He set his glass down. "On whether we thought you were worth keeping around." Mira's breath caught in her throat. Worth keeping around. Her heart pounded. It was a choice, but not truly. It was a decision made in the open but surrounded by unseen walls. A decision where refusing did not simply mean declining a ritual, it meant being cast out. Or worse. She felt suddenly sick. Her fingers clenched against her lap. This wasn't about honoring the dead. This was about loyalty. The humans didn't consume their fallen because of some primal instinct. They did it to ensure unity. Mira's skin prickled as she realized the full weight of the ceremony. This wasn't about remembrance. This was about control. Because in a world where war and death were constant, where soldiers fought and bled together, trust was everything. And those who refused the ritual, they couldn't be trusted. Mira's voice was barely a whisper. And the ones who weren't worth keeping, Ethan didn't blink. They don't stay. The answer was simple. Too simple. The room felt smaller. The walls seemed closer. She thought about the missing bodies, the rumors that had reached her long before this night. They didn't waste their fallen. They didn't forget them. They consumed them. But what about the ones who walked away? What happened to them? Mira's pulse roared in her ears. Where did they go? She asked. The silence stretched longer this time. Ava Monroe was the first to break it. She sighed, swirling the dark amber liquid in her glass. Some leave, she admitted. Some don't. Mira felt her stomach twist. And the ones who don't, she pressed. Ethan finally smiled, but it was different this time. It wasn't warm. It wasn't reassuring. It was knowing. Humans are a practical species, he said. We don't like loose ends. Mira's breath hitched. Her mind spun. This was never about Captain Hayes. It was never about remembrance. It was about loyalty, unity, strength, and anyone who couldn't be part of that. They weren't just removed. They were erased. A sudden weight pressed down on her chest, and for the first time since stepping into this room, Mira felt truly afraid. Because now she wasn't just a guest at their table. She was part of their secret. And that meant she couldn't leave. The humans around her had been testing her from the moment she sat down, watching her reactions, her hesitation, her fear. Had she passed? Had she proven her worth? Or had she made a mistake by coming here at all? Her fork felt heavier in her hand. The walls felt closer. The humans at the table weren't just soldiers mourning a fallen friend. They were something else, something much more dangerous. Mira forced herself to smile, hiding the rising panic beneath a mask of calm. I see, she said slowly, carefully. Ethan nodded, his sharp blue eyes studying her, measuring her, deciding something she couldn't afford for him to decide wrong. She had to be careful. She had to act like she belonged. Because if she didn't, she would never leave this room. Not everyone accepts it. The air inside the chamber was thick, not just with the scent of the meal, but with something unseen, something more powerful. Expectation. Mira felt it pressing against her skin, making her breath come short and shallow. She had swallowed the bite. She had played her part. But had she convinced them? Captain Ethan's sharp blue eyes studied her for a moment longer. Then he finally leaned back in his chair. The tension in his shoulders eased ever so slightly. You're starting to understand, he said, a quiet satisfaction in his voice. Mira forced a small nod, her hands resting in her lap to hide how tightly she was clenching them. She knew now that this was not just a tradition. It was not just about remembrance. It was about loyalty, about proving who belonged and who didn't. And Mira was not sure which side she stood on. The others continued their quiet conversations, their glasses clinking lightly against the polished table, their voices calm, at ease. But Mira couldn't relax. Her mind was racing. She needed to get out of here. But she couldn't just leave. Not yet. If she rushed, if she seemed nervous, if she gave them any reason to doubt her, she would disappear, just like the others. She swallowed the fear rising in her throat and forced herself to pick up her drink, taking the slow sip. Pretend. Stay in control. Stay alive. Then the doors hissed open. The sound made her body tense involuntarily. She turned just enough to see the figure stepping inside. A man, but not a human. Corin. Mira's heart almost stopped. Corin was from the Valori species, towering over most humanoids, his sleek, scaled skin a deep emerald green. His dark eyes swept across the room, scanning the faces at the table. And then they landed on her. Mira felt a jolt of recognition. She had seen him before, passing through the market halls of Aegis 7, always keeping to the shadows, always watching. She had assumed he was just another quiet traveler. Now she wasn't so sure. Corin took a slow step forward, his voice low and measured. "We need to talk." The room stilled. Ethan turned his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "This is an exclusive gathering, Corin," he said smoothly. "You weren't invited." "I don't need an invitation," Corin replied. His voice was calm, but Mira could feel the tension radiating from him. His sharp gaze flicked back to her. Mira. Outside. Now. Mira's blood turned cold. This was dangerous. If she followed him, she risked exposing herself, risked making the humans suspicious. But if she refused, Corin's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists at his sides. He wasn't just here for casual conversation. He knew something. Ethan exhaled softly, then gestured toward the door. "If she wants to leave, she's free to go." Mira glanced at him. His voice was polite, but the message beneath it was crystal clear. "Be careful what you choose." She forced herself to smile, standing from her chair as smoothly as possible. "Thank you for the meal," she said, her voice steady. She turned to Corin and nodded. "Let's talk." She walked toward the exit, feeling every gaze on her back. The doors slid open, and she stepped through. Corin followed. The doors sealed shut behind them. Outside the chamber, the truth she wasn't supposed to know. The hallway was dimly lit, stretching into long, quiet corridors that led to other quarters of the station. Mira walked fast, her heartbeat hammering in her ears. Corin didn't speak until they turned a corner, far from the human's ears. Then he grabbed her wrist. Mira jerked back instinctively, but his grip wasn't rough. It was desperate. "Tell me you didn't eat it," he whispered urgently. Mira froze. The question caught her off guard. She expected accusations, maybe warnings, but this. She hesitated. Why did he care? His dark eyes bore into hers. "Tell me," he repeated. Mira swallowed. "I did." Corin's face darkened with something close to horror. She expected him to scold her, to recoil. But instead, his grip tightened slightly, his voice lowering even further. "Then we don't have much time," he said. Mira's stomach twisted. Time for what? Corin glanced over his shoulder, as if checking for watchers. Then he leaned in close. "They lied to you," he said. "That wasn't lab-grown meat." Mira felt the floor drop beneath her. She shook her head. "No, that's not." "Yes, it is." Corin cut her off, his voice urgent. "I've been watching them for years. I've seen what happens to the ones who refuse. They don't leave, Mira. They never leave. They're not exiled. They're not erased." Mira couldn't breathe. Corin's next words destroyed the last shreds of her certainty. "They're fed to the next ones who come." Mira's vision blurred. "No," she whispered. But her mind was already piecing it together. The missing aliens, the ones who had vanished, the ones who refused to eat. They didn't just disappear. They became the next meal. Mira staggered back, her stomach roiling with nausea. The bite she had swallowed felt like poison in her gut. Corin reached out, steadying her. "Listen to me," he said, his voice sharp. "You're in danger. You passed their test, but that doesn't mean you're safe. They'll watch you now. They'll expect you to be one of them." Mira clutched her arms, trying to keep her breathing steady. "How do you know all this?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Corin's expression darkened. "Because I was supposed to be one of them once," he admitted. I refused. I barely escaped. Mira's breath hitched. Then why did they let you live? Corin's eyes turned cold. They didn't. He pulled back the collar of his uniform, revealing a deep scar running across his throat. A wound that should have killed him. A wound that had been meant to silence him forever. Mira's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about a ritual. It wasn't just about tradition. This was a machine. A cycle. A system designed to weed out the weak and feed the strong. And Mira. She was inside it now. Corin grabbed her shoulders. Listen carefully. They think you belong now. That gives you a chance. A chance for what? She whispered. To survive. His grip tightened. And to burn their entire system to the ground. The final test. Mira's breath came in short, shallow gasps. The hallway around her felt narrower, colder, as if the walls were closing in. She had eaten it. She had eaten someone. The truth burned in her stomach like acid. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to purge, to get away. But there was no escape. Not yet. Corin's grip was firm on her shoulder, his emerald green skin cool against her burning flesh. You need to listen to me, he said, his voice an urgent whisper. You are inside now. That is both your curse and your only way out. Mira barely heard him. The sickening revelation swirled in her head. The meat had not been grown. It had not been lab-crafted. It had been real. It had been someone. She had failed the test. Or had she passed? She swallowed the nausea threatening to rise. She couldn't afford to break now. Not when she was being watched. Not when every step could mean life or death. Her voice came out hoarse. What do I do? Corin's dark eyes locked onto hers. You have two choices. One, you blend in. You pretend this never happened. You act like them. You stay close to them, gain their trust. Maybe, one day, you find a way out. Mira swallowed hard. She couldn't imagine living in this nightmare, pretending to be part of it. Two, you bring the whole damn system down. Her stomach clenched. Easier said than done. She looked at him, fear and doubt warring inside her. How? Corin exhaled sharply, his eyes scanning the hallway. Not here. We need to get to a safe zone. But before he could move, a voice cut through the silence. Going somewhere. Mira and Corin turned. Ethan stood at the end of the hall, arms crossed, his piercing blue eyes unreadable. His usual calm smirk was gone. Mira's pulse roared in her ears. She had seen this look before. It was the look of a hunter who had just caught his prey. The final test. Ethan stepped forward, his boots heavy against the steel floor. I've been thinking, he said smoothly, his voice eerily composed. You seemed hesitant tonight, Mira, like something didn't sit right with you. Mira forced her face into stillness. I was just processing. Ethan tilted his head slightly. Were you? A shadow moved behind him. Two more humans had appeared, Ava Monroe, and another soldier Mira didn't recognize. They were blocking the hallway, trapping her. Corin shifted slightly, positioning himself protectively in front of her, but Mira knew it wouldn't matter. If this turned into a fight, they wouldn't win. Ethan sighed, as if disappointed. You see, Mira, we're very selective about who gets to sit at our table. His voice darkened. And more importantly, who stays. Mira's fists clenched. This was it. The real test. They hadn't invited her because they liked her. They hadn't welcomed her because they wanted her to be part of their traditions. They had brought her in to see if she could be trusted. And now they had their answer. Ethan took another step forward. So, tell me. His sharp gaze flicked toward Corin. Are you with us, or against us? Mira felt every muscle lock up. There was no escape. Not without consequences. Her mind raced for a way out. A way to survive. A way to win. And then, she made her choice. She stepped forward, forcing confidence into her stance. She met Ethan's gaze head-on. I'm with you, she said. Corin stiffened beside her. Ethan raised a brow, intrigued. Are you? Mira nodded slowly. I understand now, she said carefully, measuring every word. I understand what this means, what it takes. She took a slow step toward him. I understand that there's no room for weakness, no room for hesitation, that only the strong move forward. Ethan studied her, his expression unreadable. The others behind him watched, silent, waiting. Mira took another step. If I wasn't ready, I wouldn't be here, she said. She saw the flicker in Ethan's eyes, the split second of calculation, of reassessment. Then, he smiled, a slow, knowing smile. Mira knew then that she had passed. For now. Ethan gave a small nod. Good. He stepped aside. Then let's see how much further you're willing to go. Mira forced a tight smile, stepping past him. Every nerve in her body was on fire, every sense screaming at her to run. But she didn't. She walked forward, back toward the chamber. Corin hesitated. He looked at her, eyes dark with warning. She didn't look back, because she knew what she had to do. The beginning of the end. Inside, the humans raised their glasses. The air was lighter now, almost celebratory. Ethan took his seat once more, and Mira followed. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. She had made her choice, not to join them, but to destroy them from within. She would learn their ways, earn their trust, find the cracks in their armor. And when the time was right, she would tear their entire system apart. Ethan raised his glass. To our future. Mira raised hers, smiling, waiting, knowing that soon she would be the one holding the knife.